Good morning everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to do a series of rainbow reflections in watercolour, and maybe you could paint one and put it in the window of your house to say thanks to all the efforts of all the hospital workers, doctors, carers, etc, etc. It will be a lovely gesture. So first of all, we're going to just discuss what's here. So I've pre-prepared a sheet here with 3 rainbows on it. So we're going to do 3 different reflections in water. So the first one is going to be a wet on dry glazing technique. The second is going to be a wet on dry mark making active water. And the third one is going to be a wet in wet, blurry, sort of misty day type water. So if you would like to try them all, then split your A4 piece of paper into 4 and replicate what I've done here in advance and let it dry off completely. What I've done is I've used ultramarine in the sky. I've used all the colours of the rainbow on the rainbow, and I've used a sap green for the trees in the distance, and this is the same ultramarine in the water. It's best to draw your picture out first, then to put your sky colour in and your watercolour in, and then wait for it to dry off completely and put your rainbow in. You can dry it off using a hairdryer if you're impatient, or you can leave it to dry and go and have a cup of tea. So wait for the sky to be thoroughly dry before you put these colours in, and also start with your lighter colours first. So I did the yellow first, then the orange, then the red, then the blue, then the purple, and in between I waited for them to dry so that they didn't bleed into one another. Okay, and use a fine brush. So I used a number 3 fine tipped brush, or a detail brush, and that was for the rainbow stripes. And then I used I think this is about a number 1 or a number 2 round brush, just to put the water down and put the trees in. So like I said, get to this stage, the notes are here if you want references. And then we can start, well, you can start to follow this tutorial. Okay, so the first one, you can see I'm going to do a wet on dry glazing technique. This is this one. So I've painted the rainbow, everything's dry, trees are dry. I've also painted the reflection of the trees in the water, and I've left a very small gap between the trees that are on the mainland and the reflection. And then I've painted in the rainbow down the bottom, and everything is completely dry. So now I'm going to select a brush. I'm going to use this round mop brush. You can see it's large, it's got lots of hairs, and it's a half size brush. And I'm going to mix up some ultramarine blue. I'm going to mix it slightly paler than I did in the sky. And I'm just going to try my mix out on here. So this is why a little patch separate is good for testing on. So that's too dark, so I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. And I'm going to try it again. So I'm going to have a glaze that's sort of this tone, not this tone. This is too dark. This is just about right. And the thing with glazing is you can put one layer down and then let it dry, and then if it's too light you can put another layer on. So I'm just going to pick that up with my mop brush. Quite a lot of water, and then I'm just going to wash very gently over the top of the rainbow, which is in the water. Now the reason why you do it gently is so that you don't disturb the colour that's underneath. So it needs to be fairly swift and gentle. So if you need to practice, then practice on another sheet of paper with your paintbrush. So I'm going to start at the top of the water, that is, but I'm not going to go into the sky, obviously. And I'm just going to wash carefully, without applying too much pressure, over the entire picture. And you can see that it has picked up a little bit of paint there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the brush, wash it off a little bit, and I'm just going to push that back around the edge there. Don't worry about the bleeding here. That's okay. And don't worry too much about the bleeding there. You can lift, if it's gone a bit too much, just pat it around. And that's it. So leave that to dry now. Okay, let it bleed, leave your paper flat. And that's your first reflection done. The second reflection I'm going to use the detail brush for. And we're going to put in some of the rainbow colours, but we're going to do it with a slightly wiggly line. So I'm going to start again with the yellow. So it's just a cadmium yellow that I'm using, and I'm going to use it quite thin again, and I'm just going to put that down the middle, but rather than being precise like we've got here, I'm just going to make it a little bit sort of wiggly. Can you see? So almost like you've got nervous hands or shaky hands. So into the next colour, which is the orange, which should be just above the yellow. And we're not going to worry too much about it bleeding here, but we're going to make it wiggly. And we're not going to cover too much of the yellow up if we can help it at all, like so. So this is wet on dry. So like I said, a sort of shaky mark. And if you do cover up a bit of your yellow, don't be frightened to put a bit back in like I've done there, like so. Into the red, which is a cadmium red again. And we're just going to again make it nice and shaky and not worry too much about those lines going into one another, like that. So shaky. And then we're going to go into the darker tones. So I'm going to pick up the cerulean blue and just put that down below. Now you've got to be careful here because we don't really want too green a colour happening. So hopefully by the time you get to this point, the yellow will have dried a bit and it won't run into the yellow too much. And then finally into the purple, like this. And you can see that because the paint is wet still, that it's running into each other. The marks you're making are runny. So that's exactly what we want to happen. And if it's still wet, what you can do is just drag from the sides in a horizontal manner like this, some of the colour out into the water. Same at the top, just drag lightly. I'm using my brush in a sort of vertical way and I'm just dragging some of the colour, and you can even go into the yellow if the yellow is still wet, that is. Just drag a few of those marks across. So once we've done that, we can actually work into the water. Now, because this one is a active water, so this is ripples in the water, what we're going to do is we're going to look at perspective. So basically, lines here in the far distance will be thinner and smaller, and lines here in the foreground will be thicker. So we're going to take our blue paint and we're going to water it down quite a lot because we're going to work in the distance first. So a bit of water, and what you need to do is just hold your brush up and make sure it's a nice detail brush and that it's got a point on it like this, and you're just going to lightly put in some marks like this, and really small and really thin. Now the thinner the brush you've got, the better, because that'll help you and won't hinder you if you press too hard, because basically if you press too hard you'll get a mark like that, whereas if you do it lightly it just is a lot thinner. So this is just practice really. So we got lines thin, so we're going to put now a touch more paint into the mix, and we're going to make it slightly darker, and we're going to thicken our, because we're coming towards ourselves now, we're just going to thicken those lines up a touch like so, and do them bitty. Don't get into this sort of rhythm of making similar marks, and then as you come further forward you can really thicken those marks and also go across your rainbow reflection, and even let some of those colours bleed in too. And then as you come further forward, really make those marks nice and thick and darker. Can you see that? I hope you can. You can go all the way across in places across your rainbow, and there we have it. So that is your wet on dry mark making active water. So this is sort of a still day, and this is has a little bit more wind in the air. Okay, so the last one we're going to do is what is called a wet on wet, a blurry misty day. So what we need to do for that, as we've done before, is we need to take a fairly large mop brush and we need to actually wet the paper before we start. So we're going to wet the paper, not too wet, you just want it to be shiny, so we don't want it to be dripping. And we're going to take the what should we do first? Yeah, we'll put the blue in first. So we want a little bit of ultramarine, and we're just going to put that towards the top of that body of water. Again, if you can leave a little white mark, then it looks much more effective than joining that. So there's a little bit of blue, a little bit of ultramarine, and we're just going to put a bit down here. Now with this method you need to work quickly because the paper will dry off really quickly on you. So have all your paints mixed up and your brush is ready. So we've got some blue in, now we need to put our yellow in, and remember that the yellow is in the middle of the rainbow, like so. Yellow, and then the orange is above it. Try to put some strength of pigment on both sides, and then the red is above that, so I'm going to start in the middle here. I'm just going to put a flash of red. You can see how quickly I'm having to work, and I'm thinking all the time, is it drying out, is it drying out? And then we're going to go in with the blue, and you can see that blue's quite strong, and the reason why that is because it is now starting to dry off the paper. And then finally into the purple. Don't worry about it running. We want it to run, we want it to be blurry because it's a misty day. Okay, so this is your blurry misty effect. If the paper is still wet and you have some gaps, then just pick up whatever pigment you need to fill with and just put some paint back in like so, and add a little bit more water if you have some gaps. So this is supposed to be, and if you have any excess paint that looks like it's going to create a blob on the end like that, just take a piece of toilet paper or roll and just soak up those edges like that. Okay, so there's 3 techniques for you This one was, if you remember, was a glaze technique. It's just started raining in here. You can hear the rain on the roof. It's very, very appropriate. This one, like I said, is a wet on dry technique using a glazing method. This takes a little bit of practice. This one is the active water, and then this one is supposed to be like a misty, murky day. Okay, so have a go at all three. Make a painting, put it in the window, send a message out to everybody. That would be lovely. And please remember to subscribe so that you've received further updates about my new tutorials. And thanks for watching, and see you again.